Have you ever thought to yourself, I don't know if I can trust my own feelings or my own needs in this relationship? Well, if so, then this video is for you. Today, we're going to talk about self-trust. And by the end of this video, you're going to be able to understand how trauma disrupts self-trust, examples of what it looks like in your relationship, and most importantly, some safe steps you can begin to take to rebuild self-trust. Hi, my name's Tom Philp. I'm a trauma-informed coach, and I've been working with couples for decades, helping them rebuild trust in themselves and others when they struggle with relational or attachment trauma so that they're able to experience a safe and secure relationship. Trauma often disrupts the ability to trust ourselves. Typically, this comes out of environments where we've been betrayed or we've been rejected, or our parental figures or a partner is consistently unavailable to our needs. When that happens, what we often do is we often begin to question our own experience in the relationship. We begin to question whether our feelings are correct or our own needs are correct. And when that happens, our self-trust begins to break down. So trauma has a tremendous impact on our own ability to trust our own experiences. Now, I want to take a quick sidebar for a minute, and I want to talk about the difference between self-trust and self-esteem, because I don't want us to get confused, and I actually think this is important enough that we need to be able to differentiate these two concepts. When we talk about self-trust, what I'm talking about is your ability to be able to trust your own thoughts, feelings, needs, and wishes, not only in yourself, but as it relates to your relationship as well. So self-trust is very much about the ability to consistently be able to rely on your own thoughts, feelings, needs, and wishes, and to feel comfortable in your own skin. When we talk about self-trust, oftentimes what we're talking about is sort of an internal sense of safety. One of the advantages of secure attachment style is that they have the advantage of being able to trust their own experience and to feel safe in their own body. When their body sends them a cue or a signal, they don't question it, they don't feel like they need to override it, but rather they can rely on it as something they know is important that they need from their relationship. And when we have relational trauma, it often does the opposite. We begin to override that feeling. We override our needs, our wants, our wishes. And then oftentimes what we end up doing is using an adaptive or coping style that doesn't always work in our best interest. So when we start talking about self-trust, we're talking about the ability to consistently rely on your needs and your wishes and your wants and your desires in your relationship. Now, that is different than self-esteem. Self-esteem is often about how we view ourselves in comparison to others. And so when we view ourselves more negatively compared to others, then we tend to feel bad about ourselves. And we tend to see ourselves less than a positive light. And that's more about self-esteem than it really is about self-trust. We might feel something, but when we compare it to somebody else, then our feelings aren't as important, or we might judge them. And so we end up evaluating ourselves in a very negative way. Then that means we have a sort of lower sense of self-esteem. It may look like this. Maybe your partner comes home and they see you all dressed up as you're all getting ready to go out that evening, and they says, "Oh, you look wonderful." And you say thank you, but inside you're thinking to yourself, maybe he really doesn't mean that. Maybe he's only saying that because he's my husband and he has to, or whatever. You find ways to justify or dismiss or ignore something positive that someone has said about yourself. And the reverse can happen as well. Your wife can come home and say, "Oh my gosh, you did a wonderful job on that." And you might look at a project you've done and think, I could have done better, probably not very good, somebody else would have done better, so on and so forth. And so we're making these comparisons about ourselves, and we view ourselves in a more negative light. That is more about self-esteem. So I just wanted to be able to sort of tease apart these different concepts because I think it's important when we talk about building self-trust, we don't confuse that with what it means to think more positively or to feel like we have more agency in ourselves, and that encompasses more of the self-esteem. So now that we have an idea of the difference between self-trust versus self-esteem, let's talk a little bit about how do we start to build better self-trust in ourselves. One of the first things we can do is we can just begin to get more in touch with the body. And you hear me talk about the connection with your body all the time. And it's so important. And I just want to mention why. Because one of the things that trauma robs from us is that ability to connect with our body, to be able to listen to those danger cues, to be able to take in healthy, safe relationships. And when we're disconnected from our body, oftentimes what happens is the body actually tells us where the trauma is, and it reminds us of the trauma. Trauma isn't just in the head. It's not just in the memory. It's very much a part of the body. One of the best books ever written on trauma is a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And he named that for the particular reason. It's by Bessel van der Kolk is his name. And he named that book for this very specific reason, that in all his years of research, what he began to realize is how connected the body is in the treatment of trauma. When we start talking about post-traumatic growth, we're talking about the ability to be able to learn how to be embodied once again, as we were before the trauma actually happened. When you think about how we come out of the womb, we don't come out of the womb betrayed by our own body. We don't come out of the womb not knowing what our wants and needs are. We very much know how to communicate what we want. When we're wet, when we're hungry, when we're tired, we know how to communicate that to our caregivers. And that's because our body is very much sending us those cues. And so being able to get in touch and be embodied once again means that we're able to recognize those feelings that come up. So one of the things that you can do is you can keep a journal. And so you can write down, say for example, you take time at the end of the day. Was there any time in the day where I felt at all dysregulated, or I felt my body sending me a cue? Were there any heightened moments of emotion that I need to pay attention to? And then you can just jot those down. And you can ask yourself, what signal was my body sending me? And then ask yourself, did I listen to that signal? Did I override that signal? Did I downplay or dismiss that signal? This goes right to what we were saying earlier in this video, is that we oftentimes what breaks down the ability to trust ourselves is that we've learned to override those signals, that we can't trust those signals our body is sending us. So we need to be able to reinstall the ability to listen to our body when we get those danger cues, when we get a sense of fear or anxiety that might show up in our stomach. How can we begin to listen to those cues our body is sending us so that we can pick up on those signals and be able to respond to them? So keeping a journal, I think, is a great way to start recognizing other times, moments, or even people that I surround myself with in a particular day where I tend to override my feelings, I tend to ignore my own thoughts, and I ignore those signals my body is sending me about what's happening in my life and in my environment in those moments. One of the last suggestions I want to make is our ability to create micro moments for ourselves. These are just little promises we make to ourselves that we can keep. And when we do this on a consistent basis, then what that does is it allows us to sort of build up a reservoir of confidence and trust in ourselves. And so I want you to consider making small promises to yourself. Maybe it's just walking one day a week, or maybe it's going back to the gym. Maybe it's feeling like, oh, I need to eat a little bit healthier, or I need to re-engage in this relationship that I let drop years ago. Maybe it's I'm going to go home and I'm going to try to be less defensive with my partner. Or I'm going to try to go home and let my partner know how much I appreciate them. And I'm going to say one affirming or validating statement to my partner each evening when I get home. But these small little promises, these small little steps begin to, as I said, build up sort of a reservoir of trust in ourselves so that we can begin to know we can follow through consistently and safely about the things that we want and need and desire in our relationship. Okay, that's our video on self-trust. Thank you so much for watching. If you want a longer version of this, you can always go to our podcast, Trauma-Free Relationship, and maybe under my name, Tom Philp, and you can search for it anywhere where you listen to your podcast. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Philp, and I'm here to remind you to stay grounded, clear, and connected.